Good morning. How are you guys doing this morning? Who's jet lagged? I came from the U.S., so I'm a little jet lagged. Okay, so the conference theme is reason, purpose, self-esteem, keys to a better life and society. And what I'm going to do in this keynote is talk a little bit about these notions of reason, purpose, self-esteem. So this will be, from a certain angle, a kind of introduction to what Ayn Rand's philosophy, which she named objectivism, is about. And yesterday, Tal, in some of the opening remarks, said that part of what objectivism is about challenging existing ideas and challenging probably many ideas that you hold. And that I think is a big aspect of what objectivism is about, is that many of the ideas we hold are not true. And that you should substitute them for ideas that are actually true. And a way of looking at the philosophy is through this lens of reason, purpose, self-esteem. But let me start with that first aspect. Here's one quote. Well, I'll get to the quote in a minute. So if the philosophy is about trying to identify, there's all kinds of ideas and deep ideas about the nature of life and our place in the world that are wrong, and that one should think about and challenge and substitute for something better. What the philosophy is really about is about empowerment. Empowerment at a very deep level, that you're taking control or charge of your own life, that you're exhibiting a kind of self-responsibility at a very deep level. And here's the quote that I like. This is a quote attributed to Mark Twain, though I've never been able to find the actual reference in his work. So here's the quote: "It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." So the big issue in life is not that you're ignorant about things. The big issue in life is that you think all kinds of things are true that are not actually true. And a major aspect of Ayn Rand and why she's so challenging is this is her view, that there's all kinds of ideas that we hold that are just not true, but everybody believes them, everybody echoes them, and everybody acts on them. So one way of looking at objectivism is that it's asking you to rethink very basic ideas and to rethink them because they're wrong. One of the ways that Ayn Rand would often put this, and if for those who've read Atlas Shrugged here, this is in Atlas Shrugged, it's check your premises. But that really means check your fundamental ideas because they're wrong, or many of them are wrong. And I'll give you just three kinds of examples, because I think Ayn Rand thought of it, and if you read her writing, it's all over the place that there's wrong ideas. I'll give you three examples. But what the basic issue, here's a way of retaining, and this is basically the way I'm framing this keynote. There's two choices in life. You can be programmed by other people. So it's like you're a marionette and someone else is in control in a fundamental sense, because they're setting your fundamental ideas, your fundamental view of what's right and wrong in life. And that's determined by other people. Or you can be a self-programmer and write your own program and think about these things, decide for yourself, and then program yourself. So it's your basic choice in life, she thinks, and that this is the deep role of philosophy in life, is are you going to be a self-programmer, or are you going to let other people program you and control you and decide what you do? And I'll give you now three examples that I certainly think of as they're on the side of people are more like this marionette and not like the self-programmer. And here's I'll start off with a kind of controversial example. Religion. When you think about religion and you look through the world at the different religions, what you don't see is, okay, you have a child of Muslim parents and they end up a Protestant. Or you have a child of Jewish parents and they end up a Catholic. What you see by and large is the son or daughter of Muslim parents ends up a Muslim. Son and daughter of Jewish parents ends up Jewish. A son and daughter of Catholic parents ends up a Catholic. And that, if you're really thinking of it and trying to step back, that looks pretty accidental. That you end up being a Catholic or Jewish or Muslim because, well, that's what my parents were. That's what the wider environment was. That's what everybody was. Are you more like the person who's self-programming, or are you more like you're controlled by some outside force and you happen to be born in this religion with these religious parents or this religious community, and that's what you end up being? And if you're really going to be a self-programmer in life, that's exactly the kind of thing that you can't do. I don't think this is too much of a secret that Ayn Rand was an atheist. But the fundamental perspective in the philosophy is you need to think about this issue. Religion is giving you deep ideas about this is what the world is like, this is your place in the world. So is it true or is it false of what I'm being given? And am I going to follow it just because, well, this is what I'm giving and this happens to be who my parents are, this is the community that I'm growing up in, or am I going to think deeply about it? So the whole phenomenon of religion, I think when you look at it sort of worldwide, it falls on the side of this is not what self-programming looks like. It's not what taking charge of your own life and taking responsibility for it is what it looks like. So this is one realm that I think our environment and our intellectual culture and so on, it pushes in the direction that we should not be self-programming. Unfortunately, it's in a lot of places. In another, to take something outside of the religious world into the secular world, our best universities, this is certainly true in the US, our best universities too much encourage a kind of dogma and indoctrination. That you're supposed to accept the ideas that are being spewed in the classroom, too much on authority, too little on, you're supposed to think these through, challenge these ideas. And so on the issue of you learn all kinds of things that aren't true, one big realm that Ayn Rand talked about a fair amount is religion. Another big realm is the whole of academia. You learn all kinds of things that aren't true. This is kind of embarrassing, but I was a student at the University of Toronto, which is one of the best, if not the best, universities in Canada, in the late 80s. And I would say half of my professors were Marxists. I mean, this is really true. They were communists. And when you learn history, you learn it from Marxist historians and much of the social sciences and humanities. And this is after 50 years of communism, you've seen the destruction. You've seen it firsthand in Poland. And yet, this is what you were learning in the classroom. And it's a lot of it is, it's just wrong. And it's wrong in a fundamental sense. If you look at the whole kind of framework and philosophy of communism, it's wrong in a deep sense. And yet, this is what you're absorbing. And it takes a special initiative to say, no, I'm going to really think about this and challenge this and not just swallow it. And this is part of what objectivism is about. It's about really thinking things through at a very deep level. A contemporary example, Greta Thunberg. Now if you think the portrait in the culture will be like, this is a teenager who's speaking before the UN. This is what empowerment looks like. This is someone who's taking responsibility and exercising it. And yet, and from a certain level, I think that is true. But at a deep philosophical level, is she accepting all kinds of things that are not true? Well, this is part of what she said to the UN. She said, I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. And this was about climate change. This is 100% wrong. If you look out through the world today, there's more people in the world than ever before, and fewer people as a percentage in poverty. So if you look at the actual number of people who are living good lives, who are living longer. So it's never been better than it's been. And yet, she's going before the UN and saying this, and there's no challenge from anybody. Everybody just, yeah, okay, this must be true. It's 100% false. And this is, again, it's false at a very deep level. It's false about the whole of the 20th century history, the whole history of industrialization. It's false. And yet people accept it and people act on it. So what objectivism is about, in various kinds of ways, is challenging the intellectual status quo. And a way of looking at that is what it's demanding of a person. You don't want to be this. You don't want to be controlled by others. You want to take control. And the way to be a self-programmer is to embrace at a very deep level, at the core of your being, that what I'm going to be about is reason, purpose, self-esteem, and I'm going to rethink these issues. And this is what, in life, true empowerment looks like. But it is scary, because you're rethinking at a very deep level. You're often challenging the status quo or the mainstream, and then you're going to stand outside the mainstream. And that is a scary position to be in. It demands a lot of a person. And now I want to talk just a little bit about these three things: reason, purpose, self-esteem. What reason is about, and it's the core of what empowerment is about thinking things through for yourself. And when Ayn Rand talks about reason, what she means is accepting ideas only because you see the evidence and the logic behind that idea. You see why it's true, and you accept it because you see why it's true. And she means, when she says, one of the ways she will often put it is that you should embrace reason as an absolute. What she means by that is you embrace it in every area and aspect of your life. Not, well, okay, I've been diagnosed with cancer, now I've got to really figure out what to do, and I've got to think about that. Or I'm at work, and I've got a project, I've got to think about that and reason it through. She means this throughout your life for everything you do. Your personal relationships, your family life, how you think about your hobbies and how you integrate that with your career and so on. She means throughout life of really, really thinking things through. That you should be really interested and have a personal interest in, I want to know what's true, because I'm going to lead my life by what I think is true, and I'm going to avoid what I think is false. And that takes a real effort and commitment. So I put it, much of what you get in the message in objectivism is that you have to be worthy of the truth. You have to deserve it. You have to earn it. You have to put the work in to see, what do I actually think is true? And the contrast to this, which is all over the place, and we're often pushed in this direction, what does it mean then to not embrace reason as an absolute? It's to accept ideas for some other reason than thinking that it's true. And it can be because some authority says it. This is often what you get in college classrooms. It's, well, this is what the experts say, and this is what you're supposed to believe. And if you ask for arguments, or if you ask why, it's, why are you asking those kinds of questions? This has been established. This is the consensus, and so on. There's often an appeal to authority that many people succumb to. There's an appeal to tradition, which is really just an old authorities. You can go by the current authorities, or you can go by the past authorities. Religion, it's really, if you ask for what is the tradition, where is tradition most followed and even worshipped? Religion really is, it's passed down from generations. And why think these holy books and so on are what should guide us? The basic answer in the end is because they're old. And someone else figured this out, and who are we to think about it? Who are we to question? And there's all kinds of variants of this. It can be because this is the popular viewpoint. That's the reason, really, in the end, that I accept it. And this kind of, on the issue of self-programming, what objectivism is really encouraging, what Ayn Rand is really encouraging, is to think for yourself, why do I really hold this idea? And is it because I have been convinced of it, and I see the reasons for it? Or is it because it's really, well, it's the mainstream idea, it's popular, This is what the traditions I've been brought up in, so this is what I should accept. And nobody in the end can determine this other than you. You're in charge of this issue. And it's you have to figure out, why am I really accepting an idea? And there's all kinds of causes that, other than because I see and because I think that it's true. And as Yaron said, so we'll be talking about the issue of reason, particularly and certain aspects of the Ayn Rand's view and the objectivist view of what is reason, what does it mean to go by reason tomorrow. But so this is one aspect of self-programming. It's taking control of your mind and really exercising that control and thinking deeply about, why do I accept the ideas that I accept? And the other issue, so the purpose, so reason is about, so to go back to what I said at the opening, that a lot of what you believe isn't true. And the issue of purpose, that Ayn Rand thinks a lot of what you want is not good. So one is the issue of true versus false, and one is the issue of good versus bad, or good versus evil. And that a lot of what we've been taught as good, in fact, is not good. And so a lot of what we've come to want and think is right and think that this is what we should do, we shouldn't do. So the issue of reason is taking seriously, of thinking through, what do I think is true, what do I think is false, and why? The issue of purpose is thinking about the issue of good and evil. And I think most central to Ayn Rand and what she's most known for is she rethinks this issue. And she says much of what people consider as good is not good, it's bad, and it's evil. And much of what people think is evil is in fact good. And this is actually, it's the hardest issue to think through. And if you look through the history of Western thought, the number of people who are moral reformers in a deep sense, who say that, look, our received views of what is good and what is evil, what is right and what is wrong, they're not good, and we should change them, and we should change them radically. The number of people who do that in the history of thought is very, very small. And one of the reasons is why it's hard to do this. If you try to step outside of good and evil and say, well, look, there's some problem here, you'll be branded as evil. And that is a hard place to stand, to say the whole kind of mainstream culture, the intellectual currents are saying, well, that's evil. So Ayn Rand wrote a book, The Virtue of Selfishness. And what do you think some of the reaction was? Well, look, what you're advocating is evil, you're evil. If you read stories to this day about Ayn Rand, it's she's wicked, she's evil. And the basic reason is she's standing outside of what people think of as good and evil and saying there's something radically wrong with all of this. And what the natural phenomenon is, people will say, well, that's evil to say that. But she thinks if you really are going to be a self-programmer, you have to think through this issue. You have to challenge it. And that the received view is basically, in one form or another, the good is the non-you. So long as you're working for the public interest, the common good, the proletariat, the nation, the race, the poor, the sick, the blind, those in need, that's okay. That's good, because it's not you. You're not aiming for any benefit to you. You're not trying to enrich yourself. You're not aiming at your own happiness. As long as it's some non-you, and then it's cashed out in various kinds of ways of who the non-you you should be aiming for and serving. But this is the received view. And if it concerns you, if it concerns the self and the pursuit of what is good for the self, what is good for you, that's evil. And this is if you look at the kind of moral views that we're presented with, they boil down to this. And she thinks this is 100% wrong. Her view is that the whole purpose of values and of good and evil is how to pursue what is actually in your self-interest, what is actually good for you. In the words of the American Declaration of Independence, and part of why that declaration was so radical, it's about the pursuit of happiness, which means the pursuit of your own happiness. And any kind of view that asks you to subordinate yourself to something supposedly higher, that some non-you is superior to you, is corrupt. And we'll be talking a fair amount today about this issue. But it's the wider point that I'm making right now in terms of sort of setting up what we'll be talking about in the conference is to be a self-programmer, you have to think about this issue. You can't take it as someone else has decided what is good and what is evil, and that's what I'm supposed to follow. That is what I'm supposed to, in the end, obey. It's you have to think about this issue and think, what really is good? What really is evil? What arguments have I been given for thinking that, okay, so long as it's not about me, that makes it good. And if it's about me, if it's about so, that makes it evil. What arguments have I actually been given for this kind of view? To be a self-programmer and to take fundamental charge of your life, it's you have to think about this. And the issue of purpose, then, in objectivism, is about taking charge of your direction in life, so the values that you're going to pursue, and not let it be determined for you by the outside forces. So that's reason, and that is purpose. And they drive towards the issue of self-esteem. Self-esteem is a self-appraisal. It's your estimate, your view of yourself. And it basically comes down to, on Rand's view, and you can put it like this, I said that it's difficult to be a self-programmer. And there's kind of two issues that you face if you're going to really take charge of your life. Am I able to do it? And am I worthy? Am I worthy of all this effort to try to design and program my life for myself? Am I worthy of that effort? Am I entitled to it? Am I deserving of it? And the first issue of am I able to do it comes down, she thinks, to am I a person of reason or not? Am I actually thinking things through at a very deep level, or am I just accepting what's been given to me? And to think that you're able to do it is you're able to do it if you really think about it. So she thinks there's an intimate connection of being a person of reason and actually having self-esteem. And then on the issue of am I worthy of it, in the end she thinks you're worthy of it if you're willing to challenge the status quo in regard to good and evil. If you accept the view that any focus on myself, any concern with myself, my self-interest, if that is evil, then there's something about even the desire or quest for self-esteem, to think good about myself, there's something wrong with that. And morally there is something wrong with that, because that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be concerned with other people. And particularly if other people are in need, if other people are suffering, if other people are sick. That is what your focus is supposed to be, not on yourself. So she thinks the existing moral views, if you're really on a quest for self-esteem, undermine self-esteem. That self-esteem is about self-confidence, which comes from using your reason. And it's about self-respect, which will only come from a moral view that says what you should be doing is pursuing your self-interest or pursuing your happiness. So she thinks this is a consequence. So reason, purpose, self-esteem, they go together and they form a total on her philosophy. And if you remember, we showed that 2-minute video on objectivism yesterday. And one of the formulations in there, it's a philosophy of reason, purpose, self-esteem. And that's often how she described what the philosophy is about. And the three notions are tied together, and they form a total on her view. And this is what we're going to be talking about this week. So another way you can look at self-esteem is it's an issue of, am I good? You're evaluating yourself in a moral sense. Am I good? And on traditional views, the view is, well, if you're actually concerned with yourself, there's something bad about that. It's an issue, another way of thinking of it, as can I and should I feel proud or guilty about myself and what I'm doing in life? And on the issue of self-programming, this is a major way in which people control you. It's if you accept standards that render you guilty, you feel ashamed, you feel small, and you're much, much more willing than to do what other people say. And I'll give you an example of this. Again, you would think, so this is an example of the richest person in the world at the time. You would think if anyone's in control of their life, it's a person like that. This was Bill Gates at the height of his powers and economic power when he was running Microsoft. And if you ask, does he feel proud, or does he feel in some ways guilty about what he is doing? I think what you get from what actually happened, so in the US, the Justice Department went after Microsoft and said, what you're doing is wrong. You're exploiting people. Part of the way they were exploiting people, they were giving a browser away for free. And that's why this lit. I mean, you can't make this up. He was giving a browser away for free, and that is vicious. And you're taking advantage of people. And it's a Justice Department, so it's what you're doing is not just. It's an injustice. And if you look at Bill Gates' story, it's clear, I think, that he loved running Microsoft. This was his passion in life. And if you watch interviews, I still think it's his passion in life. But there's something corrupt, there's something ignoble, there's something unjust about doing this. So he devoted the second part of his life to giving his money away. This is part of what it looks like, that this is not a self-programmer. This is someone who, it's the outside world that is dictating how he feels and therefore what he does. He feels guilty, and it's guilty not really by his own standards, but standards that he's accepted, like this is what is right and this is what is wrong. And if this really is what is right and this really is what is wrong, it's something is correct about I should feel guilty, and I have to do something else. So the issue of really earning self-esteem is crucial to being a self-programmer on the objectivist view. And so it boils down to there's reason, purpose, self-esteem. And it's reason is the fundamental, which leads to a proper view of what good and evil is, which makes possible a real self-esteem, a self-confidence, and a self-respect that one has for oneself. And we will be talking about, so we will be talking on the issue of reason tomorrow, about free will and determinism, and free will versus faith and emotionalism. So it will outline more of the objectivist view of reason. Today we're going to be talking about the issue of purpose and why she thinks what we've been given in about what is right and wrong, why she thinks there's something deeply, deeply problematic about this. So she's challenging that. And the whole end result is that you can live a life of self-confidence and self-respect. So this, in a nutshell, is what objectivism is about, and this is what we will be talking about through the rest of today and tomorrow. So that is the overview that I wanted to give. So thank you for listening, and we have time for questions. Thanks. And Yaron's going to join me for the question. So how much time do we have, Ilan? About 25 minutes? Or? Okay. So who's going to be the brave? There's a mic over here. It's a little, at least hard for us to see, but there's a mic in the middle here. Yeah. Yeah, hi, Carl.
No, it's off.
Well, I can shout in the meanwhile.
There you go.
It's on.
It's on.
It's on? Okay, great. This might be a little bit, might derail the presentation a little bit, so I'm sorry, but, you know, just do it with it what you want. But in the objectivist literature about purpose, which I think is the central thing for this conference, there's a lot of discussion about a central purpose and the need for specifically a central purpose, and that has to be a productive purpose. So if you want to, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that and connect it to this conference. Thanks.
So Yeah, so in objectivism, there is an issue of central purpose, but it's a derivative issue. And Tal tomorrow will be talking a bit about this. So at the end of the conference, we'll be talking a bit about this. But it's a derivative issue in the fundamental issue about purpose is where should I set my life's direction? What am I actually aiming at? What am I trying to do in the most fundamental sense? And for objectivism, it is you should be pursuing your own life, your own self-interest, your own happiness. And then there's the question of how do you actually do that? What does it actually mean to be pursuing my life? To be actually and fundamentally concerned with my own self-interest of what is good for me? What is happiness consistent? And then there's a whole view and argument about the essence of life for a human being is production. We're not like other animals. We don't just kind of forage in the looking for berries and so on. We can make things that have never existed before. This is a whole form of life. It's what all the environmentalists don't get, that it's we make things, we make the world better, and we make our environment better and better and better, or at least we have the capacity to do that. And a dedication to that is what, if you're taking your life seriously, is what you should be dedicated to. And in that sense, it becomes central to your life and your conception of yourself as a moral being and a moral person. But it's a derivative issue from the fundamental issue of purposes. What am I aiming at? What is actually good and what is evil? What should I go after and what should I avoid? And then once you think about that properly, there's all kind of content to that. Do you want to?
No, I think that's good. Go.
We can't see anything now.
Yeah, can't see a thing.
What would you say to people who say, but people do go after their interest and you're naive if you think they don't?
Oh, so you mean that the idea that everybody is self-interested?
Yep.
Yeah, or that people may say you should feel or you should think about others, but they don't. I hear that quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my view is it's just not true.
Yeah, and this is the point, because I think it's important. Rand is not saying that we know automatically what is in our self-interest, that we know how to take care of ourselves. Indeed, to be self-interested, to be selfish, to be an egoist, requires real thinking. It requires the use of reason in solving a problem, solving a puzzle. How should I live my life? So every decision requires actual thought. So it's true to some extent that people, while they view altruism, while they view taking care of other people as a moral ideal, they don't live up to that moral ideal. And in their day-to-day life, they pursue what feels good, or they pursue even what they think is good. They don't do it systematically, and when they do it, they feel guilty about it. But the things that they do, true, they're not altruistic, but they're not egoistic either. That's a false choice, that you're either an altruist or an egoist. Most people are neither. They're just nothing. They're pursuing what they feel is good, what convention tells them is good, what their mother told them they should do, the profession their father wanted them to go into. So they're not pursuing their self-interest because their self-interest needs to be figured out, needs to be thought about. And since we don't teach people how to think about what's good for me, what should be my central purpose, or what should be my purpose more broadly, they don't actually know how to do it, and they don't indeed do it. So, this is true among libertarians and kind of free market thinkers. Yeah. There's this notion that economic man, as economic actors, we all know what's good for us, and we just instinctually do it. But the fact is, we don't. Instincts don't work for human beings. We're not instinctual beings. We're rational beings. It is required of us to actually think about what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And that includes in our production activity, in our consumption activity, in our relationships with one another. In every aspect of our life, reason is essential. So to be an egoist, to be selfish, to be truly human, requires a lot of work. And people, unfortunately, most people don't engage in that work. We're not yet at the point where that idea is accepted enough, where people engage in the work necessary to be an egoist, necessary to do what's truly in their self-interest. Right? And often your emotions lead you in the wrong way. We know this. I mean, most of us can identify the fact that when we've analyzed the mistake we've made, when we look backwards, it's because we followed our emotions. We didn't think it through. And so many of us act on emotions or act on tradition or act on just things that are set in advance rather than, again, figuring it out, thinking what's true.
Okay. Hello. Devil's advocate question. As Rand abhors religion, would you say agreeing with everything she said would be a religion in itself? And if so, what would be areas that you would say she was wrong or you at least disagree with? And a second question would be, you say, for example, Bill Gates, because he feels the pressure of what society says he should do, etc., etc. That's why he donates money. Wouldn't you say that, for example, Ayn Rand Institute giving out scholarships is pretty much the same thing? And can you at least give him the benefit of the doubt that he does that because he simply thinks that that is right, you know, for his own reasons, not because of pressure of society?
Sure.
I can take the first aspect, which was about agreement. So there's no issue, or it's wrong, I think, to think about it like this. If I agree with someone, that's a black mark on me. And what I should be doing, if I'm rational, if I'm independent, is disagreeing with everybody. That's the issue is, why do I agree? So why do I agree with something? And nobody asks of scientists, do you agree with Newton's 3 laws? All 3 of them? And why is that? Yeah, that's a cult. You guys are all a cult because you all accept these 3 laws. The issue is not they accept it and they are in agreement. The issue is why. And if they're really, and I think this is true of a real scientist, if he agrees because they each independently see, oh yeah, here's the evidence and here's the argument for this, and this is why we should think it's true, and you can see that and I can see that, and so we agree. But it's not, you're not following the leader. And so it's the same for a philosophy. There are people who just follow it because this is what Ayn Rand said, or this is what Karl Marx said, or this is what Immanuel Kant said. There's people who treat philosophy like a religion, and I just accept it because this is what the authority and what the leader said. But if you take seriously that philosophy can be a science, and when it's properly practiced it is a science, then the issue is, do I see the arguments and evidence for thinking why this principle is true? And if I accept it because of that, yes, I agree with somebody else, but that's not a black mark. They're both using reason, and you've both reached the truth independently, and you're in agreement because it's true. So it's the idea that what a cult is about agreement, that's a non-essential. What a cult is about is not thinking. And that is bad, and you can disagree with people for an unthinking reason and just sort of do the opposite of what, like, I'm going to be independent. There's a false view of independence. And whatever someone does, I'm going to do the opposite. And that is no more rational than agreeing for bad reasons. But you can agree for good reasons. And if you really take seriously that there is a truth, then people will agree about it if they've reached it. So that's you can take the Bill Gates.
Let me answer the Bill Gates question quickly. I mean, I'd say there are a number of things that would lead me to believe. I don't know with certainty what motivates Bill Gates. I'm not inside his head. But there are a number of reasons that would lead me to believe that the interpretation of Bill Gates doing what he's doing is because of external pressure. One is you watch him. You watch him talk about what he's doing. And when he talks about Microsoft, and when he talks about investing, and when he talks about technology, he lights up, he's beaming, he's excited. And when you ask him, why did you leave Microsoft? He doesn't say, oh, because I had enough of that and I really wanted to focus on philanthropy. No, it's because of what the government did. And he says that. It's because of what the government did to him that he had to leave Microsoft for his own sanity. He couldn't manage there anymore. He couldn't run the company anymore under the conditions that the government had imposed on them. You know, they had a government bureaucrat sitting in the offices of Microsoft approving every decision that was made for 10 years. Only about a few years ago did they leave. And then when you watch him talk about the philanthropy, I mean, he likes it, and he brings a fresh approach to his philanthropy, and he's one of those philanthropists that you kind of admire because he's doing them in a kind of first-handed, original kind of way. But there's not the same excitement, there's not the same thrill as there is when he's talking about Microsoft, when he's talking about investing, when he's talking about technology. And when you really start digging about why are you doing the philanthropy, it's because there's a sense in which I need to give back, right? And he says, I've been lucky. Really? I mean, when he talks about how hard he worked, when he talked about the kind of effort he put into it, when he talked about the innovation, he, again, lights up and he beams and he understands that, and then he's been lucky. No, he's worked at it, he produced, he created, he earned it all. So he himself talks about the altruistic, external, ideas that are motivating him towards philanthropy that are not part of kind of a first-handed, kind of egoistic approach to the world. Now, so he values them because he's been taught to value them. He values them because this is what the culture expects of him. You know, his father and mother had a huge influence on him. They're very, very, when you see interviews with them, they're very, very focused on everything is about the community. Don't take pride in what you did. Don't focus on self. So there's a whole background, if you study Bill Gates, where you can see it. But look, I have to admit, I'm suspicious of all philanthropists. Not because I'm against philanthropy. I mean, I think philanthropy is fine. I think it's great. You could do that. But in a culture which venerates sacrifice, which venerates the other, which venerates helping the poor as the way you achieve virtue, and a culture that hates business, that believes business is immoral fundamentally, where businesses have to make up for the evil of making money, then when you become a philanthropist and you dedicate your whole life to it and everybody suddenly puts you on top of a pyramid and they think you're such a great guy, that's suspicious to me, your motivation, other than suspicious. Because these people are part of that culture. They've absorbed those ideas. They've, to a large extent, and I talk to them a lot, they've accepted those ideas. So it's not motivated purely by self-interest. It's motivated by what is expected and what is demanded for them to achieve moral acceptance, ethical acceptance.
Hello. There's this idea that we hear a lot in the culture that whether in self-help books or gurus, that you have to find a purpose that is greater than yourself. And I see the connection here and how this idea can be exposed. My question is, how can you think about that issue? Because some people actually find a purpose greater than themselves, which is serving, and they succeed, and then they become motivational, and people start following them, and they think that's the truth, that you have to find something greater than yourself, i.e. by, just being altruistic.
I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but I certainly agree that phenomenon exists. I think religion is the major source of that phenomenon, at least in Western thought. It's serve a cause greater than yourself. That originally meant serve God, not yourself. You're the servant, you're subordinate, you're subservient to this, and that is what counts in life. But this is a point, and this will come up in the next talks, but this is a point that Ayn Rand makes, that it's a simple but profound question. She asks why. Like, why is it good? Why is it good to serve something greater than yourself? And if you take the original, the religious conception of this, it makes no sense at all. So what does God need service for? Like, what does he needs a butler? He needs someone to do his errands. What does he need it for? He's all perfect, all knowing, all powerful. What does he need? I'll leave that. What does he need it for? There is literally no answer to that question. So and this is part of what Ayn Rand's arguing, it's a bogus conception of a purpose. What are you doing this for? You have absolutely no reason. And if you take seriously your notion of God, it's, what does he need this for? And then you get all the kind of questions, why does he create suffering and so on? But what does he need service for? So all it's about is telling you, don't think about yourself. Don't have pride. Don't be ambitious. Don't pursue your happiness. Serve something greater. Why should I serve something greater? What am I doing? Stop asking those questions. Just stop doing and being concerned with yourself. And so it's a bogus conception of a purpose. And I think all the secularized versions of this are similarly bogus. But a person can have a bogus conception and devote his life to this. I don't think it's fulfilling. It certainly doesn't produce happiness and is not rational. But a person can do that. What objectivism is about is having a rational purpose. And this means thinking it through, what you're being given, serving something greater than yourself, and what makes it greater? Why does it need service? And if you actually think those through, and it doesn't take that long, there's nothing there. The Marxist conception of serving the state, when you start asking, how does this work, and why do we need a dictatorship, and how is it going to wither away, and by what cost? There's no answers to any of this. The whole point of Marxism was, don't pursue your happiness. If you have ability, if you're able to do something, give it to those in need. How is this going to work out? How is this going to bring prosperity on earth and so on? There's nothing in Marxism that actually tells you anything about that. And so it's the same kind of dynamic. It seems like they're erecting some significant purpose and so on, but the whole focus is on the you as evil. And don't pursue yourself, don't pursue happiness, don't pursue what your life needs. And that's a bogus conception.
Thanks.
You mentioned religion earlier as a reason not to be reasonable, as a reason that people are not accepting reason. And when you look at different interpretations of Christianity, there's certainly some which are more socialist, some which accept less reason, and some are accepting more reason. There's, for example, the prosperity gospel in America, which is certainly accepting more reason than other interpretations. But being like a pure objectivist, what is your view on Christianity? Is it itself unreasonable, or are there interpretations which could be coherent with objectivism? What is your view on that?
You want to take this?
Sure. So, Christianity, qua religion, first and foremost, at the end of the day, there is an element of faith. There has to be an element of faith. That's what religion is about. It's about faith. Faith is the negation of reason in whatever scope you apply that faith. It means we're not applying reason to this. And to that extent, it negates objectivism. Objectivism is about the application of reason to every aspect of one's life and to every aspect of one's understanding of life. So there is a contradiction. It contradicts objectivism in a very fundamental sense. Now, you gave a positive example of prosperity, Protestant prosperity Christianity in America. It's true that prosperity Christianity says something about, you should go and you should make the most of your life and you should make money and stuff like that. But the idea that that is based on reason is ludicrous. They don't argue for that from any kind of principle. What they argue from is from a book. They say, here's a quote from Jesus, and Jesus says you should do this, so do it on faith. You should go become rich, not because it's good for you, God forbid, right? But because Jesus says you should go make a lot of money. And by the way, once you make a lot of money, you should give a lot of it away, because at the end, if you want to buy yourself into heaven, you have to be charitable. So even when they advocate for supposedly pro-self or pro-capitalism or pro-freedom ideologies, they're not doing it from a place of reason. They're doing it from a place of faith. And therefore, that is much more fundamental. So one of the things you'll discover, because I'm assuming a lot of you come to this from kind of a libertarian perspective, which is focused primarily on economics and on politics. Our focus is not primarily on politics and economics. Our focus primarily is on how to live your life successfully, how to make the most of your life, how to be the best human being you can be for you. There, you keep going into darkness. So there it's so important to apply reason to your life. And whether these churches land up being pro some semblance of political freedom or not is less important than the fact that they're anti-individual life, they're anti-individual happiness in this life based on a foundation of reason, because any other foundation is going to collapse on you. You cannot be successful at life building it around reading certain passages in the Old Testament and distorting them in ways that somehow supposedly lead to you being, making more money or something like that. So as long as you ground your ideas on faith, you're not going to be successful in life.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
So, towards the beginning of the, you were talking about facts and about reason, and I thought it was kind of interesting how you were very adamant about using like 100%, but I feel like if you use 100%, you kind of blind yourselves maybe on the fact that there are some things that don't quite fit in with this. For example, if we go back to like the Greta example, you were saying 100% not true, and yet there are people who are suffering, there are people who do come from poverty. Even from this group, for example, we are, a lot of us, lucky to be here. We come from very good situations, and yet there are maybe some of us also here who know what it's like to have hunger and who have built ourselves to be in a better situation. And so to say completely 100% not true, I feel like that is omitting a lot of fact, and again, going against what you yourself have said about looking at the entirety of the situation and how we analyze things. Mm-hmm. So how would you respond to something like that?
So I think what you're saying is true if what was meant and what she's saying and what she said in the UN address is just in the world, there's people who are suffering and there's people who are dying. So that is certainly true. But the context of her remarks is not just trying to point that fact out. The context is it's worse than it's been, and we're at a cliff. And if we don't do something in 10 years, we're going to fall off the cliff when we're dead. And that I think, is 100% false. So if you're taking it not just the bare fact that there's people who in the world are suffering, there's obviously people who are dying, there's people who die every day. But if you're taking it as a comparative statement, which is what it is, and she's saying things are getting worse and we're about to get off a cliff, that is 100% false. Things are getting better and have gotten massively better. And if you look at China or India or Africa and you compare it to 40 years ago, they've gotten massively, massively better. And it's because they've started to industrialize. And it's because they're using fossil fuels. And it's because they have a freer economy. And in that sense, I do think her statement is 100% false. But it's certainly true. Yes, there are people suffering in the world and there are people who are dying. But not for the cause that she's saying why they're suffering and why they're dying.
Yeah, and it's worse because what she is promoting is more suffering and more death. Because by negating fossil fuels, by negating the one source of energy that we have, the one way, by negating capitalism, the one economic system that actually generates the prosperity, she is guaranteeing that there will be more suffering and more death and more starvation in the future. So what she's saying is the exact opposite of the truth. And she's advocating for that. If she really cared about poor people, she'd be on the other side of the argument in terms of free markets and in terms of sources of energy, right? So she's promoting the thing she says is evil, which is suffering and death. Right?
I think we're out of time. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to never miss a video.